Hey guys, and welcome to episode 7 of Office Hours, the RocketJump Film School podcast. And today we're going to sit down with Joey Scoma and Freddie Wong and talk about the CGI video we just did that went kind of super viral. And we're going to talk about the concepts in the episode about, why CG isn't actually ruining movies and what it took to create that video essay and what we hope to do in the future with video essays like that. So let's get to it.
RocketJump Film School, Scene 1, Apple, Take 1, Mark.
Hey guys, welcome to a new episode of Office Hours, the RocketJump Film School podcast, and today we're going to talk about the CG video that we put out that kind of blew up, which is super cool, and we're going to talk to Freddie and Joey. Freddie wrote it, and Joey put it together, and I think did a fantastic job. So
it's my sultry voice that everyone turns on. I need to speak slower. That's what everyone says.
So.
I need to slow my roll.
They don't have to read your books on tape then if you wanted to narrate anything else.
I should just like, if you like to hear me, I have an audible dog. Yeah.
I think it's just preference. If anyone complained about you going too fast or whatever,
we
were trying to
cram a lot of information in there, you know? And also I speak generally pretty fast. My mom tells me I should slow down.
I think that the pace of it was so much a key of its success anyways, because it is just, it's like
also it's funny too, because again, people don't know this. Originally it was like 8 minutes long, right?
It was 10.
It was 10.
Yeah.
So the original voiceover as written was 10 minutes long, and I got into stuff that we eventually decided to cut. And it was things that some people pointed out, like for example,
we had like 3 outros.
Yeah,
that was the thing.
And there was also a little bit of a discussion about like, okay, hold on, let's clarify what CGI is and what's the difference between CGI and compositing, and then looking again through sort of like the comments on it, because this one was a very useful video in terms of looking at how people were responding to it. There's a couple of things that I noticed. One, a lot of people called out but this isn't what you're showing, isn't CGI, it's compositing. It's actually 2D matte painting. And so to which I would respond, I'm like, you're right. Sometimes they're going to Photoshop and doing that. But sometimes for a background, they'll be taking 3D geometry and they'll be taking photographs they shot on set and projecting photographs onto 3D geometry, and the lighting may be baked in, or they may be adding lighting to it. So technically, that's no longer just a 2D image, but it's still photographic elements, but it's also 3D at the same time, and it's still technically CGI. So that's where that distinction lies. And so,
CGI, it was like that was generated in the computer, and that's
and nobody's saying. And also, I would say this, and this was a section that was cut out. Nobody is saying that they're generating this stuff, de novo without, and they're taking photographs. So so obviously, they're taking real world elements and putting that in. And nobody's saying they're being like, let's try and invent the brick texture. It's like, no, we're going to take a camera and take a whole bunch of pictures of bricks and then use that as our texture. So it's always a blend, And so we felt that for the video, it was much easier to just simplify what we were talking about. And sort of, the goal was to have like a gee whiz moment. If you could have a moment where you looked at something and you said, oh, wow, I didn't know that. Then I think we kind of accomplished what we set out to do. But it definitely hit a nerve, man.
It hit a nerve, whether people agree or don't. Most people do. They were just like, yeah, that's we live in a great time for filmmaking.
And and I think a lot of the criticism too, again, just to kind of get into the discussion of it, just to jump right in, a lot of the discussion of, because I remember someone made a counter argument, which was, well, it doesn't matter though, because the point is CG is making it too easy for filmmakers to use it as a crutch, and it's the most simple solution for it. But that to me belies a lack of understanding of like actual film history, because if you really take a look at it, it's like, dude, there's been so many things, and Matt pointed this out too. There's been so many things that are crutches for bad movies. Like before CG, it was giant sets. Like D.W. Griffith's movies, he straight up was just like, you know what I'll do? I'll build a gigantic set, and everyone will be like, this is amazing. Look at this giant set. And like my story kind of sucks, but whatever. I'm gonna do a giant set. Like the entire 50s, 60s was, okay, you know what we'll do? We'll make a monster. Let's make a monster movie. We'll take a guy in a rubber suit and let's use that to distract. So cinema's a long history of directors, filmmakers, writers using other things to distract. CG is no different than any number of techniques that have been used and have been reacted against, and so for everything everyone says about practical effects, there was a time when practical effects sucked. Like, go and take a look at like rubber suit monsters and stuff, and like, again, it was,
and people had the same complaints. It's like, why do you need all these effects in a movie?
Exactly. It's the same conversation.
I think the crutch is less of a thing. It's more on the filmmaker, like the main point of the video is, because CG can allow you to put the camera wherever you want, whereas if you didn't have that, the filmmaker then needs to find a way to make something happen. Like, he needs to be so specific with how he shoots it, as opposed to infinite possibilities. And I feel like that's the only thing that people will argue, and then again, it just falls back on the filmmaker to make the right choices.
If you don't have a strong vision or a strong voice, and you don't make those decisions, then it's on you. It's like CG is not forcing you to make weak decisions because there's too many choices.
The computer made me do it.
It's actually, you have to be a stronger filmmaker in order to make that happen.
Yes.
So it's actually not making things easier.
Well, it's a hard tool to learn. It's a hard tool to learn, right? And just because people misuse that doesn't mean, like, to use a woodworking analogy.
You really love woodworking analogies.
I mean, it's like a lathe.
It's a really good analogy.
That and the guitar.
The guitar.
Yeah.
Well, the guitar is easily understandable, but it's hard. You know what I'm saying? Okay, I'll put it this way. Like, okay, look, 7-string guitar, right? You got extra string. It's a whole bunch of stuff. Most people use it to play pretty crappy metal. Some people use it to elevate the guitar art, right? It's not on the people who play crappy metal. No one's like, well, that's the 7-string guitar's fault for that. Yeah. It's like, no, you just still suck.
Yeah.
And you have to be even better with more possibilities, right? It's harder. It's more difficult. You have to be better for it. And I think one of the I guess is to kind of like go back and be like, okay, where did this video come from? Why is it touching a nerve? You definitely see Reddit. You definitely see a lot in places where there's this feeling of, okay, this crutch CG is sort of ruining movies, and it's just sort of this pervasive, sort of underlying thing. And the people who are like, no, that's not true. Everyone that's like, no, it's just out there. People kind of think that.
Yeah. Well, and like to add to that, I feel like a lot of that comes from the fact that it's from a computer and it's not real, quote unquote. Like, it's cheating. Like, if you look at when Tron did the first, I mean, they weren't the first computer effects in films, but that big, huge feature, they weren't allowed to be considered for the special effects Oscar because they considered it cheating.
Right.
And I think that view is still there with computers, like, because it's digital, because it's computer, it's still kind of cheesing. It's a cop-out.
You brought up an interesting point. You just put real in quotes, and I feel like our generation, and especially this, whatever this is right now, we live in a very double-edged sword type of world where everything is like people are like, oh, this is based on a true story, this is real, like, and there's reality TV, and it's like insane, and then we have all these other fantastical things that are clearly not real, but trying to pass as real.
Yeah,
authenticity is a theme in society, is definitely a thing. Everything from like the Banksy documentary to, it's like, absolutely, there's this weird sense of that, and I think it shows up in places like this.
And when CG doesn't live up to now this other standard of it's not real, it's like people are always have it on their mind, so they see it more easily when it's bad. Or when it's shitty, as you say.
And I think it's and what we're trying to do is we're trying to bring an appreciation to it. I actually learned there was a term for what we talk about in the video. I didn't realize it. It's actually it's called the toupee fallacy, which is essentially what it is. Which is, you can assume it's like, I think toupees are the worst. There's only bad toupees, but it's like, well, because you only identify when they're bad. You
don't know good toupees or toupees because they're doing their job.
Right. Yeah. So your assumption is, well, they must all be bad.
That's actually what it's called.
There is a term for it, the toupee fallacy.
Wow. That's
like,
great.
oh, that's what we hit upon. I didn't even realize that.
It is that.
But I think it was useful because that was even my personal experience. Like, because you see some of these demo reels, and a big one that we actually didn't include, that is a great one to look up, is the Wolf of Wall Street stuff that they did.
Well, you already spoke about that, didn't you?
A little bit.
Did we talk about that on another?
Yeah, but that's a great one to look at. And a lot of people actually said, "Oh, this is a great one," but they had that similar feeling, which was they looked at it and they're like, "Whoa, no way!" Like, I didn't realize that, and that's, I think, what we were trying to get at, which was that, "Whoa, no way! I never realized that" sort of effect. And what was nice, I think, a little bit about this video was, and it was helpful too, because in our conversations in terms of like, okay, what do we show? What movies, what are good examples of this or this theme is, it was super, in a weird way, it was super helpful to have done a lot of stuff. You know what I mean? To have seen like car commercials, and like car commercials these days, they really rarely take the car out. Like they will still, but like there's definitely moments where it's like, no, that's a CG car, and they'll use a lot of CG cars in car commercials, right? And that's one of those things that's like weird industry knowledge, because there's no reason for regular folks to know that. It doesn't affect your lives in any way. It's not some mind-shattering revelation. So what I realized, and I think what's kind of nice about these essays that we're doing, is that it's cool to be able to bring a little bit, however small that we have, of the perspective that we have having done some work in the actual film, in film industry, and in that sense, to be able to say, oh, hey, did you guys know this? Did you guys know that? And it's always, I think, kind of cool.
We're in a special position to be like, hey, we know all these cool things. Like,
we know some cool things.
Some cool things. A little bit. Like I know how food commercials are made now, having P8 on, and they are totally different than what did you know that on pancake commercials like McDonald's and stuff like that, you spray the pancakes with Scotch Guard so that syrup will roll off of it instead of get absorbed into it.
Nice. Oh, that's awesome.
It's totally not real, quote unquote, but if you saw syrup getting soaked into these pancakes, it's not as appetizing, even though that's what happens in real life.
Really?
It's
they do
really,
Scotch Guard.
It's really interesting.
That's a good one.
Starting to get hungry.
Do you know the Carl's Jr. burger commercials? We shouldn't be doing these around lunchtime. When the burger drops and everything falls into place.
That's a fishing line, right?
Yeah, it's a line through the middle.
So everything goes directly down.
That's really cool.
It's super smart.
Yeah,
it's like I love those things though. Like you find out these cool, weird,
and you know what's funny too is like just to kind of get into that a little bit, that in a weird way, some of that stuff is still the domain of food artists, because here's the thing. It's like computers definitely can do food and like items and objects, right, as we show in the video, and you definitely have your physics are pretty much there. Some of it's pretty complex depending on what you're doing with it, but then it becomes, in the industry, it becomes a cost consideration, because the time it takes to take a Big Mac and render it in CG perfectly and have every sesame seed exactly where you want it on the CG side is actually, it's going to be more expensive than taking a food artist who's been doing it for the last 20 years and doing it that way. So then it just becomes a cost consideration. And then in that case, it's just like, no, it's not a matter of whether computers can or can't do it. It's just, it's just cheaper to do it and have someone paint food and spray it with Scotch Guard and all that stuff. Like you could do a fluid dynamic simulation of syrup going over real pancakes, but no one's going to do that. It's just too expensive. Easier to get a can of Scotch Guard and do that. And a lot of times I think what you find is the solutions that end up showing up in movies really does have a big pricing component to it. Obviously there's the excess, there's this big summer blockbusters where it's like, oh, they can just do whatever they want. And I think one of my favorite examples of this honestly done poorly is if in the skydiving sequence, A Quantum of Solace, which is it's just ridiculous.
Never saw it.
So Quantum of Solace, there's this part where Bond is skydiving and he doesn't have a parachute. Okay, so it's like, oh, okay, it's like a classic Bond moment, doesn't have a parachute. So the decision was made, and this is just blew my mind that this was. And so rather than doing like stunt guys doing a skydive fall and filming that, which you could, it's not super duper expensive compared to what they eventually did do, which was the director Forrester, right? Super wanted to get Daniel Craig's performance while falling, so they rented out like a giant, like those like those tubes, the indoor things. So they shot Daniel Craig in an indoor thing, so that you could get his face for real and not face replace it. And then because they're indoors in a sterile environment, they're like, okay, now we have to relight it for outside. So then they had to create a 3D model of Daniel Craig's body, map it to his movements in that space by hand, and then light it according to what it was, so that you reapply the lighting on top of his base. It's just like, what I'm describing there is hundreds of thousands of dollars, if not millions of dollars worth of VFX work for that sequence. And honestly, you look at it, it doesn't really look that good.
Yeah.
After all of that.
Does it look like Pierce Brosnan again going down the ski slopes where it's like, I mean, that was pretty much a throwback to all the other cheesy James Bond sequences where you got a guy driving a car that's clearly just a backdrop and stuff like that, but some of those Bond things.
I think that would come come down to the director knowing what VFX can do and what is the line of diminishing return.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. And and so to give a counterexample, Kingsman has a skydiving sequence where you have people who don't have a parachute, right? Almost the exact same thing. But then here's an example of in Kingsman where they're doing it in a way that makes their lives easier. Now, not to say the story makes the same decisions could have been made in Bond, but here's an example of it from the production design standpoint. They wore helmets and jumpsuits. So so already your head, you're not doing a full head, it's just the face. So if you want to replace something, you can just do just the face of it, which makes life easier, right? They're also doing the way they're shooting it, they're coming into Iron Man angle, so they don't need that. So you can have your actor and you can cut to like the Iron Man angle from inside. And also they're doing real stunt falls. They're going, they took the Red Bull stunt team and they did actual falls with that. And that sequence looks really good.
Yeah,
and that
great.
sequence is a really well made piece of cinema, right? And that's from a decision standpoint, even though Vaughn is a guy who from a CG perspective does things very stylized. I think that a lot of people hate on that, which is I think is wrong, because it's again like a tool, like a paintbrush. You can have a camera doesn't have to exactly represent the world, right? There should be artistic freedom there. We're in a mode where CG pretty much has to be in a lot of these sort of movies is photoreal, right? And very rarely do you kind of deviate from that. And when you do, it's like fantasy, it's like Alice in Wonderland, or a movie like Speed Racer. Vaughn is in a realistic context and then being kind of stylized with it. But then the problem is a lot of people look at it like, oh, that just looks like crap. It's like, no. He's doing like a stylized cartoonish thing with it that's really interesting. But even in that, so that skydiving sequence, fantastic, right? Looks great. So another example of another skydiving sequence, not to get sort of too deep, is Iron Man, right? Iron Man 3, another situation where that's actually a lot of CG augmenting real skydivers as well. So a lot of times it is a blend, and it is a blend not because anything is inherently better, but generally it's the best combination of cheap and quality in terms of your final product, and that's why we're blending stuff and getting that together.
And then there was another thing I was talking about recently of expecting CGI to be photorealistic or only recreate photoreal things kind of limits your abilities on using CG. It limits your creativity. It limits what the tool can actually do, and then it thus limits innovation as well. And so if you expect CG to only be a replacement for something else, then it does a disservice to both the thing that it's replacing and the tool that it could be.
And it's one of those things where it's so versatile, right? Because what you're talking about is such a versatile thing that's like, it often can be a really good way of replacing something. And I think that, like, for example, I think the one comment that we got a lot and I was really interested in, because it showed up over and over again, both in the Reddit posts and also in the YouTube comments, is people pointing at specifically the car shot from Lucy as being like, that wasn't CG, that was real cars filmed on cameras and then composited in. That's not CG. When in fact it was CG. It was full on CG. Those cars, like, they're adding additional cars in. They have real cars in there for reference, but those cars in that shot are absolutely full on CG. And what was interesting about that was there's definitely that sense of like, this is just supposed to replace things, and it doesn't do a good job of that, and that was sort of the vector of discussion, and it's not necessarily, I think, valid. And I think what like movies like Speed Racer, those are the ones where I'm really interested in from that CG perspective, because it's like, whoa, they're doing something really crazy with perspective or something really crazy, and that's where I think that you get some really interesting stuff. Obviously, the right tool for the right time. It doesn't make sense to get all weird and cubist and stuff in a Bourne movie, like a Bourne Identity movie, where it's all of a sudden like, oh, that's really weird. But like, you definitely have that room to play around. And again, when it comes down to it, it's and everything, I think, in the ethos of the school itself, it's just like, look, it's about what. It's about the story. It's about, does it work, And again, it's the whole point of, if it's bad VFX, you forgive it because you're watching a movie and you're having a good time with the movie. You know? And also I think you were seeing like Star Wars, right? The first Star Wars is chock full of practical effects.
First Star Wars, as in the first of the prequels.
First of the prequels, episode 1. Practical effects up the wazoo. Probably, honestly, looking at the pictures, probably about the same amount of practical effects that they're doing for episode 9.
Yeah.
Like, it looks very similar. It looks
Seven.
like seven.
Yes.
And it's like
miniatures and practical sets and things, and but the thing that I thought was really interesting about that is because people hated that movie so much, they assumed
They assumed it,
that the
right?
practical
Yeah.
was CG, and therefore that's why the movie sucked, because it was made in a soulless computer.
Yeah.
And therefore the movie is also soulless. But like it was just like that's a really common just go to, like, oh well, because this stuff wasn't real, it doesn't feel real to it. It's like, no, it doesn't feel real because there's writing problems or story problems. Like it doesn't ring true to us.
I mean, does it even go back as to like look at the cameras that they use? Because it might have just, even though they built all this stuff, it was like one of the first HD movies.
That's true. It's
So
one of the first
like the
digital movies,
look
you're right.
was just already
in the realm of
That's fair, yeah.
subconsciously something off.
Something's
compared
off
to,
here.
Yeah, that's true. That's
And
probably
so
true.
I'm thinking like, yeah, it wasn't shot on film. It has a different look. Sure, they built all these things, but again, those all might play to its disadvantage to a new audience.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I think, again, if it was a
Yeah.
rock solid movie, nobody would care.
Yeah.
Nobody would care. You know, there's plenty of examples of movies that are, you know, like Collateral, right? That's super early digital camera stuff. Nobody's giving Collateral crap for being a digital camera movie.
Look great.
Yeah.
And
Stylized.
And the
Yeah.
digital look for it actually, I think, made it work more because it fit the story. It fit that gritty, like
yeah.
city type feel. It didn't
Yeah.
have to look super smooth or cinematic.
oh my God,
It-
why have we not done film versus digital yet?
oh, we need to do that.
Like the same thing as the lens comparison.
Yeah.
I've seen
Just
some
film versus digital.
I've seen some very interesting things on film
We're gonna
versus digital.
start
I feel like they had a documentary out there. We should check it out and then see what we can elaborate on, or what
I think you have to do a
what
DP,
points
and then
we
you have
get
to
point-
pull a random person on the street.
Yeah.
Oh,
Like,
do
do you care?
You're talking
We
about
could
doing
pull
the lens
Jamie
again.
comparison.
Yeah.
Let's
Hey.
shoot some film then, and let's do it all.
Yeah.
That's what I learned on.
Let's
I
do
learned
the
on
test.
film.
Yeah.
It's fun.
Let's do the
So
test.
Joey, when you were cutting this thing together, was there anything particularly challenging? And this is kind of the first time we've done like the visual essay form, which is an evolving essay form for sure.
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely.
That's an interesting
We
one.
want to keep doing it.
It was, you know what? It was just, it was sort of overwhelming on the day one when I just had an empty timeline of your voice, and then having to just find all of these things because you go so quick. You're talking about
Yeah.
things all the time. It's like, how am I going to get all these clips and references in such a short amount of time? Because I think we had to put it up in a week.
That was the goal. That was like, put together in a week.
Yeah. So with every film school video, it's like that's just our schedule. You know, we do it and then we put it out, and then and so it was a good look into your brain, and I feel like I was pulling things that I thought you were talking about.
Yeah.
And whenever I was like, Freddie, what the heck should I show here? Like when you're mentioning, what's a good example? Some of the stuff. Man, okay, I'm drawing a
Anything.
blank.
Sure, it's fine, but anything.
oh, like the shark. You know,
Sure,
you're talking
yeah.
about a shark. You have something specific in
yeah,
mind
yeah.
for that, and that was
Yeah.
Kon-Tiki.
Yeah.
So that specifically, it's like I asked Freddie. It's like, you know, everything else.
What are you
is like-
talking
Which
about, you
shark?
weirdo?
I think what really came together was when you talk about bad CG. I was just really trying to find examples of bad CG that specifically just ruin a movie, and then you pulled up the claws.
I'm
with
so glad
Wolverine.
that. Well, you pulled up Scorpion King, which was an inspired pull.
Yeah.
And I
Well,
I
think
remember
for that section of video, I had Alice in Wonderland, but then you made the argument even though it's not a very good movie, the CG in it
Well, it's
is
a stylized.
stylized.
That's a stylized,
So
yeah, exactly.
we need.
Yeah.
So for that, we replaced it with the claws.
the claws.
in-
I'm so glad that people are talking about the claws now because
Yeah.
I just feel bad for the team that had to do that.
Oh
It was the
my
hardest
gosh.
shot to do.
It's so hard.
Anyway,
Oh, it's tough.
Yeah, but I put in Scorpion King and some other well-known things, and that just sort of was like, ugh. I mean, they really missed an opportunity there. That was Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson in like his first,
Yeah.
Hollywood movie. Like, they should have all just fought. Like
Yeah.
why didn't they just get into a brawl? Instead, this like weird thing comes out. I was like, that's not what I like. He was so badass in the opening 5 minutes as just The Rock. Like, then I felt so cheated. Anyway, you don't want to make decisions like that. If that's what it comes out to, then,
this sounds like we're delving into your childhood a little.
yeah. Well, I mean, obviously, I was pulling from things that meant a lot to me.
Yeah.
I pulled a clip from The Frighteners because I always thought that was mind blowing.
Early Peter Jackson.
Early Peter Jackson with
Yeah.
Weta Digital.
You
Fred
know what?
Rizzo.
Do we have time? Can we get into Hobbit a little bit? I'm actually kind of curious about this because what's interesting to me about that one is so Peter Jackson. This is a guy who knows what he's doing. Absolutely, you know what I mean. Like it's
He's in love with filmmaking.
absolutely so
Through and through.
So so everyone pulls and holds Lord of the Rings obviously to this sort of paragon of really really well made and good good visual effects and everything, and nobody's like losing their mind over the fact that the tower when they're in the boats and the big statues are saluting, nobody's looking at that and being like, oh, that looks like crap, or it's like no, it's fine, it's in the universe and it works. And then when we get to the Hobbit, what's interesting to me was, again, it's the same reaction that you were talking about where everyone blamed, he just got so digital with the Hobbit all of a sudden, It
was a 48 frame rate and things like that.
But there's
like,
so much
things.
extra stuff that was happening there, And what was interesting was, they were still doing forced perspective stuff. They were helping that along, but the forced perspective stuff they were doing also, it was also stuff they were doing by the end by Return of the King, in terms of doing green screen and being able to, and again, it's just another interesting sort of situation where I really think that movie everyone blames CG for that movie when there's a lot of I enjoyed the Hobbit movies, but for a movie called The Hobbit, there sure wasn't a lot of The Hobbit in there. You know what I mean? Like, that's what I'm saying. But
I people kept saying there was going to be a third movie, and I just would be like, what? I was so confused by the fact that what they had done was they took the shortest book, and then they made
it the longest
movies out of it.
Exactly.
And so I feel like that in and of itself was the problem with The Hobbit. Like if there is a problem with The Hobbit.
And also the fact that you had 3 movies before that really affected people and moved people, and then having to live up to that also already puts it at a disadvantage. You bring all of that feeling that that you had watching the original Lord of the Rings, which is very that's a lot of emotions.
Yes.
And then you bring it into The Hobbit, which is a completely different story, completely different time, and and
different challenges too in terms of all the characters you need to keep track of, and the naming of it even is you're already at a kind of disadvantage because everyone's name pretty much rhymes. So it's like, good luck, dude. Yeah. It's but again, I think at the end of the day we're super happy with the way that the video was received. We're very surprised. I think we definitely touched on the nerve because the goal in the end was just, hey, give people some moments where I didn't know that was CG, and just kind of have them take just a second to reconsider that opinion a little bit with a little bit of supporting
start
evidence.
A discussion, get people thinking about it. I mean, that's one of the main things I want to do with the film school is get people thinking differently about film and thinking critically and creatively and applying that to what they're learning and what they're doing. So a lot of these visual essays isn't we know best and this is how it works. It's more like, hey, did you know about this? This is kind of cool. What about this? Look at it this way. And so I think we want to keep doing that with our essays as well, and then even with our tutorials and that kind of stuff, is just start discussion.
Just blow the lid off of film and get people thinking about film differently, whatever they can. All you filmmakers out there,
also viewers too. I think that's what's nice about this is that we can hit also the casual viewer. So you don't have to be someone who's like, I want to become a filmmaker. I think hopefully you get
if you just like movies.
Well, if you get a deeper appreciation of that, in the same way that if you really like video games, it's cool to learn how they're made, and it gives you an appreciation for the effort and the toil that goes into it. And and in this video we're highlighting a group of people who don't get really much credit whatsoever because their work is essentially invisible. So hats off to you, you CG artists, you toilers of digital pixel pushing, and
Yeah, I think that's a good place to wrap it up.
Yeah,
so
sweet.
Thanks, guys, for chatting. And if you guys haven't checked it out, it's the video is called "Why CG Sucks." Except it doesn't. And it blew up. We tripled our subscriber count.
It was our first viral video.
Oh my god, we went viral! Yay! But yeah, and we have a whole list with that video of examples and VFX reels and that kind of stuff to check out and just educate yourself and just
a good time just
cool.
looking at VFX reels for some of your favorite shows. The Game of Thrones ones are great. Yeah, it's just a good time just to look and see what the thing they got and what they ended up with and how that process happened.
Yeah. So that's on the website school.rocketjump.com or on our YouTube channel, RJ Film School. And yeah, thanks guys.
Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Yeah.